Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Conspiracy Farm, where we don't start the conspiracies, we just add the water. And now, your host of the most state-of-the-art, most informed podcast on the interweb, I present to you Pat Miletich and Jeffrey Wilson. Ladies and gentlemen, are you ready for...
All right, ladies and gentlemen, here we are, locked and loaded once again for another episode, another jam-packed episode today, ladies and gentlemen, of the Conspiracy Farm, where no, we do not go out and hunt for the conspiracies. They're already there. We just sprinkle a little bit of water on them. And today, man, another heavy hitter, ladies and gentlemen. This guy is one of those genuine, certified badass. I'm talking about a quarter of a century working in special ops as a former Navy SEAL and other applications. He is jack of many trades, quite frankly. Writer, director, producer, entrepreneur. The guy's appeared in House of Cards, does some consulting work for the Splinter Cell. The last couple Splinter Cell video games, that's Tom Clancy stuff. And currently he's working with Mr. Steven Seagal as jack of many trades once again for Steamroller Productions. And he is also, this is very cool, ladies and gentlemen, founder of the Save Me Foundation. And this is a foundation, pretty much the epidemic that's going on right now with heroin and opiate addiction. This is a foundation that fights that. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the program, Mr. Woodie Mister. How are you today, sir?
Dandy.
And of course, I am always with my sidekick, rolling shotgun, with UFC Hall of Famer Pat Miletich. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing great, man. I'm excited. Usually we have all these strictly academics. Last week we had an Oxford PhD on the show. This week we get a man's man, buddy.
Without a doubt, like I said in the beginning, certified badass. But before we get started, champ, and I hope you don't mind if I do this, let us thank the Texas Rattlesnake, ladies and gentlemen, Stone Cold Steve Austin, for having the UFC Hall of Famer Pat Miletich on the show, the Stone Cold podcast last week. If you haven't gone and checked that out, some very interesting stories, the life of Pat Miletich, a few Hollywood set stories. Note to self, if you want to live, do not piss off Robbie Lawler. Go check out the interview. But yeah, man, this is going to be a good one today. Let's get started, man.
Yeah, Jeff, I'm sure you've got a million questions. You are the research guru for shows. So, I think main thing is first off, I'll start, I guess, by saying, I met Woody years ago through some friends, just kind of by almost luck, I guess. And the minute I met Woody, I knew instantly he was the real deal. Just you look in his eyes and you go, yeah, this guy's a badass. I'm probably not going to piss this guy off. But I learned a lot. I went shooting with these guys, and trust me, especially at the time, I hardly knew which end of the gun was the dangerous one. Like I said before we started taping, I'm an expert in caveman tactics. But to watch these guys shoot, these gentlemen that are former Navy SEALs, Tier 1, I mean, the best in the world, to watch these guys shoot, dude, is the minute you see it, you know you do not get in a gunfight with these guys, period.
Yeah, I got to agree with you on that one. I mean, it's like I'm not tooting my horn, but just tooting the horn for all the boys out there, those that are listening. You hear about some of the frogmen and the other special ops guys that goes down, no disrespect to any of those guys, but, with regards to the boys in blue here, I got to say that it's real hard to take one of them out. And, some of us just feel like if it's going to happen, you better shoot down a helicopter, because that's about the only goddamn way you're going to get somebody that's not going to, shove it up your face and blow the back of your fucking asshole out. So it makes me feel really proud to know that, it's more than just the training. It's that the quality of the guy. I mean, you got to understand, going to work every day in that environment and showing up in a place where every single motherfucker wants to be there, really? I mean, and they not only want to be there, but they want to put a gun in front of their face. They want to go to war. Not war as because war's cool, but they want to go fight. They want to go do what they've been doing. Every single guy. And that is such a positive environment. It's like fighters. You got to admit, is it not like that? Those dudes are rabid. They want to be there. And that's why it's such a positive environment. That's why, as many years as I've done jujitsu and all these other things, it's like everybody is so tight. And it's just like that in the Frogman community. And it's only getting better. The guys they're getting stronger, faster, smarter. They've got better gear. They've got better means to get there, better eyes ahead of the time. You know, they're harder to kill, and they're making themselves harder to kill. And, you know, you'd be a fool to go one-on-one with them. And every once in a while, you know, even a blind squirrel can find a nut, and one of the guys might go down, and the shit happens, and it sucks. And I you know, even on Facebook, I've kind of created this my own little personal meme that I put out there. I put it out on LinkedIn too as well. I call it Frogman Down. And anytime one of the boys goes down in a combat situation, you know, I put it out there as, you know, Frogman Down. There's a photograph of a guy looking forward with a rolled up flag on his back, and then I tell a little story about him so that you know, that other people know, because it's important. It's important to know that, you know, they're not just out there you know, because it's a cool guy, fun thing to do. It's a long road. It's hard and it's rough, but it's hard to kill those guys. And you imagine 44 of those motherfuckers coming in on a target all at once. Like think about that for a second. You think like a friend of yours might be a real good shooter. He's a real hardcore dude. Think of 44 of them coming at you, or 50, you know? And so, like I said, you know, they're real hard to kill you, and you better be a good shot with an RPG or whatever, because that's about the only way you're going to take them boys down. So I give them full credit.
Yeah, it's and you guys took me to, I think it was a place called C2, right?
Yeah, that was a place. A couple guys got together. One of them was Al Clark, very good friend of mine. He passed away a couple years ago.
The guy that's the guy that was the instructor?
He was actually one of the founders of Blackwater.
Okay.
And back before, you know, when Eric Prince was still in the Navy, and the story is, you know, Al he scribbled it out on a little bar napkin on his idea, and, you know, Eric being, you know, an entrepreneurial, just like his dad, when his old man passed away and the money transferred over, and he had the means to make a difference, you know, and people don't give him credit for this, but he truly made a difference. And he was saving the government money by making it close enough to home where we could go home and not spend all that on per diem. And we got tons of training. Well, Al started all that, and that's the guy that was out there that day. And that dude's a badass shooter. And his partner's still around, Dale McClellan, and he runs a company, you know, here in Virginia Beach locally. He's out in Chesapeake, I think, now. And I'll tell you what, you know, he's probably one of the best shooters on the planet. And those guys were out there when you came out there. So that was a real fun day.
That was cool because, you know, Jeff, and for our listeners, I'm watching these guys shoot, and you guys were shooting M4s and pistols. I don't remember what pistols you guys were using that day, but I mean, the plates were just like ding, 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 falling, right? And I'm just sitting there going, this is insane. And then I think it was Al who said, here's a loaded shotgun. There's 8 rounds in it. Go ahead and shoot those 8 targets. I'm going to time you. Let's see how you do. And I'm, you know, terrible with a gun. And so I'm knocking down the targets, but slow, right? Bong, bong type, you know, garbage. And then Al looks at me and he goes, all right, you hold the timer. You're going to time me now. And he's got 8 shells in one hand and the shotgun in the other. And he goes, I'm going to load each round individually and shoot the plates. And he would load, shoot that quick, and knock them. I can't remember how many seconds it was. It was like 3 seconds, 4 seconds, something like that. I just sat there and went, I didn't even know this shit was possible. Right?
I mean, that he was an amazing shotgun shooter, and his son's an amazing shotgun shooter, and he's kind of carrying on the legacy for Al. That was a real sad day, you know, when he passed. But and I had gone to, you know, I'd done a lot with this guy. I was, you know, it was my first time in combat, 1989. I was 22 years old, SEAL Team 4, and the invasion of Panama. And, you know, Al was kind of you know, he had been in the SEAL teams a couple years ahead of me, and he was an older guy. He had been in the fleet for a little time before that. So he wasn't a senior guy, but he had been around, and he was a mature fella. And, you know, he kind of took me under his wing, and I learned so much from the guy, and he was kind to me. And, you know how it is when you're a new guy anywhere, and you just kind of gut it out and take it. But, you know, when you're kind of a green behind the ears and you're thrown right into a full on ambush from hell, you know, combat mission down in a a country that I actually was familiar with because I had done a deployment down there already. It was really good to be around people that I did trust, and I felt pretty confident. But there's nothing can ever prepare you for that kind of experience,
right.
Especially at the young age that these young guys are going out there now, and I can feel for that.
Yeah. So that was Operation Just Cause in 1989, mid-December, right?
Yeah, December 20th. December 20th, 1989, and H Hour was supposed to go down at 1 o'clock, and because there had been a compromise in town with one of the other Army units, it got bumped up. They got into a firefight, so they pushed it up like 15 minutes. And it doesn't sound like a very long time, right? But when we're supposed to be hitting the beach at a specific time, and our whole means is to use stealth to get from point A to point B, and then be standing by to hit you like a tiger, it kind of takes the thunder out of us when we're not able to do that.
Right.
And that's what happened. Now you got to remember, in Panama there's a 22-foot tidal range, and if you don't hit that tide right, you're going to be climbing cliffs. And it was like, for a lot of us, it was our first time in combat, and I was a 60 gunner, and normally I carry 600-700 rounds of 7.62 on me in belt, and that's with tracers, linked with tracers. And in the way we do it in the SEAL teams is we train ourselves to be able to load, fire, and carry our own stuff because of the small nature of our unit.
Right.
Well, that day, because I'm brilliant at 22, I decided, well, this could be a real dick dragger. I better bring 1,000 rounds this time. So I'm putting them in all kinds of weird fucking places, like in the backpack, hooked to my web gear. This is old school, like Vietnam web gear and shit too. Mm-hmm. So I'm sticking them in the bag, and then I'm like, how can I get 300 more rounds? Yeah, why don't I'll get a gas mask, one of those pouches, and I'll just feed it or flake it in there. And then one of the SEAL Team 6 guys is like, hey, you guys need any slap rounds? They're big armor piercing rounds that they use in those Vulcan, cannons off the helicopters. And we're like, yeah, man. Of course, he forgot to tell us we were supposed to link them every, fourth round or so. I just slap 100 rounds of that shit up on the front of the gun. So now I'm walking around like like the Tin Man, with no oil in my joints. And now we're coming up to the beach early, and we got to climb up these cliffs. It was a fucking shit show from the start. And everybody will tell you. And as a matter of fact, I wrote a full screenplay about it years ago, and I've improved it over the years, taking out like the real names for just for the sake of respect, but the guys that did pass that night, and we had a real bad night that night where we got hit pretty hard. We lost. It was the first time we lost this many guys since like Vietnam. Now Grenada was kind of a shit show too, but a lot of things went wrong there. But this was the first full-on assault where we had a target. We went in. Since this airfield was connected to the water, they felt that. Well, it must be we got to get our play. We got to have our SEAL mission. So we'll take it from the Rangers. Good idea, bad idea. At the end of the day, the idea was to sneak up there and just take out this one little target. But it turned into a situation where we really could have used a whole company of badass fucking Rangers with giant bushes on their head jumping in. They're the guys that relieved us in the end. But yeah, we took some heavies. We had 8 guys go down hard. With horrible injuries, where, AK-47 fires a 7.62.39 round that's got a steel core penetrator in the bullet, and it was designed to penetrate vehicles and armor and things like that. The Soviets designed that. So when you got these bullets, skipping off the tarmac where there's nowhere to hide out there, and going right into, because a lot of times what a guy does is when they hold a rifle up to their face. Now this is back in the days prior to having lights and lasers and dot sights, and just had an iron sight, and it's typically dark color, blackened, and it's nighttime, there's low light or no light, and they hold that weapon up, and they don't train a lot at night shooting these types of weapons, and all of a sudden they can't fucking see, and they definitely can't see the sights that they're used to. So now their whole their whole life, the world is out of whack for shooting. So what do you normally do? And you hear this, I'm shooting over the front sight. Well, that's exactly what you do. Is even under perfect conditions, if you're firing your weapon right, you're going to be focusing on your front sight, and your target's normally blurry. And that's like, you have to train yourself to do that because it's not normal, right? Well, now put yourself in a high stress situation. There's shit going on everywhere around you. Explosions, bullets flying, crack, crack, crack all over, guys screaming because they're getting hit, and you can't see. You put this gun up in front, you can't see shit. So what's the first thing you do is you drop the weapon down so you can see. And what are you doing? You're shooting low. And that's what happened in a lot of the cases. Those guys were taking some heavies in their lower limbs, their shins. One of the guys, I won't mention his name, but he's a badass. Later on when he healed and everything like that, and we're back in Virginia Beach and we're hanging out one of the places, he had this big giant divot in his calf muscle. It was like this big scoop, and he used to put guacamole in it, and we'd all sit around and take chips and stick it in there like we were eating when girls were around, just to kind of gross them out and shit like that. But yeah, it was a real dick drag. We lost 4 really good guys. One of them was a new guy, and he was a great guy, and it just really, really sucked that night. But yeah, I wrote a screenplay about it. I love it. I showed Steven this screenplay, and we're always talking about Steven Seagal, that is, about coming up with ways to make movies a lot less expensive, because making them in the United States is tough. And I'm like, hey man, 1989, we don't need Blackhawks. It'd be like making Black Hawk Down with Hueys. Calling it Huey Down really wouldn't have flown very well, no pun intended. But, so you had to use Blackhawks and you had to have Rangers. That was a big type of thing. But see, back in 89, man, we just had the old Vietnam woodland camouflage. A lot of us were wearing OG 107s, just green, with the little slanted pockets from Vietnam, and web gear. And we had 46s coming in to pick guys up. Yeah, I think I could do the movie pretty cheap if you got. Hey Pat, I know that you're
what's
you're
what's the name of the movie?
If you want to be a film financier, I'm feeling for you. So
I know you can make a good movie out of that. What's the name of it?
It's called Fiasco. I sent you a copy with this morning when you asked me for some info. So take a look at it.
But I wanted you to.
But what it is, it's like, I feel like some of these missions, we can't do every mission, but sometimes good guys that do nothing but train their whole lives to fight for other people, and they put themselves through hell, and then to get put in a situation that was politically motivated, and to be, for instance, we had originally trained for that mission it was a standoff mission. It would have taken a few guys. We would have put with a 50 cal round right into the engine of Noriega's hangar. We would have gone right into that engine of his jet, and that shit ain't going nowhere. Where's it going? Nowhere. But you know what? No, they don't want to do that. We want to save all the assets and give them back to Panama after the end of it. So we're going to put 60 guys down there, and you're going to push aircraft out onto this. This is a big runway, man. This is Punta Patia airfield, and the whole area is called Patia. So it was a little confusing when we were getting radio calls at one point that Noriega was coming in, in a helicopter, and we were like, whoa, we didn't know what it was. So it's one of the reasons that some of the guys that went forward were kind of exposed, because we had to stop and set up for an ambush. And then he never showed up, so we had to get back on target. But this is a full-sized airfield. Now it's gone now, and I have photographs of what it used to look like, but they got a big Trump Tower down there. They got high rises, high-end apartment. The whole thing's completely gone, man. But during the day, it was just a big ass runway. Just running down the runway with 1,000 rounds and looking off into the, and I remember seeing the firefight start with Gulf Platoon, and it looked like there were red tracers on our end, and then the Soviet round there were green tracers. So it looked like Star Wars. It was like because every fourth rounds are. And it was pretty badass, but it never really hit you until I heard the radio calls coming over from the officer from Gulf Platoon saying we got 3 men dead, and we got I think he said 6 or 7 men down, and that just hit you like a ton of bricks. Remember, I'm a young guy, this shit was like, oh god, and that's so it was important that I and I really couldn't remember it. I had a really hard time remembering anything that happened for many years. I had to reach out on Facebook when I finally got a Facebook page, just not that long ago, a couple of years ago, and reached out to a whole bunch of guys and kind of like put the story together, and then got it straight, learned some of the conspiracies. Now that's the part you might like, is there's a lot of conspiracy about what was going on, like who was there, what was that, and some guys will sit there till they're blue in the face and say no, it didn't happen, but there's an underlying conspiracy that a lot of the guys that were personal bodyguards of Noriega and part of his personal guard were Cuban mercenaries. And there were a couple guys, and I won't say their names either, that were living in Panama at the time, and they had been traveling from the East Coast to the West Coast, because on the weekends, you could do that. It's an isthmus, so it's really kind of skinny. You could travel through the jungle, and these guys, well, they would get pulled over in the middle of the jungle. Okay, and there ain't jack shit out there. And they get pulled over in the middle of the jungle. And these guys are like, they don't speak any broken English, Spanish, Spanglish, nothing like that. They only spoke Spanish, and it was really good Spanish. Right, okay? Right. These guys were dressed in a haphazard way, but they knew what they were doing. Just the way they carried their weapons. You could tell these dudes were trained. And they were different than everybody else. It was real scary for some of these guys when they came back and gave these reports. But a lot of that went unreported. So it's really hard to say who was there, because they cleaned out their dead. And back then, we didn't have the opportunity to walk through the target at the moment because we had so many guys down, we had to pull them back. It was a real shit show. So
there was no DNA testing of the guys on the other side that were down and all that stuff like they do now and all that?
No, and if they were doing any type of testing from any type of physical matter that may have been left behind in blood, I wouldn't be able to comment on that, because I just don't know. I mean, like I said, I was a 60 gunner, 22 years old, E4 at the time, and it wasn't kind of like in my lane, so I really haven't been able to get any clear indication. There's no records on the shit.
Right. And that's what I was going to ask you about. You tell me what you think. I mean, there's so many angles to this with Noriega, because, they know that he was a CIA asset. He was getting, I think, $100K at one time, and then he got up to, I think, over 200,000. He was getting probably much, much more than that, but that's what was recorded. And helping the DEA against drug dealers and all the stuff coming through the Panama Canal, and then saying that he was accepting big money from the cartels also at the same time. And then he was obviously, helped mess with the Sandinistas for us. And then I think he kind of, what did anyway, was that he started accepting military assistance, equipment, things like that from Cuba and communist countries. And that's why Reagan decided to take him out. But that was also, he was part of that Iran-Contra scandal, right? With all the drug running and all that sort of stuff potentially. So was it because he turned and took assistance from communists, or was it Reagan's administration trying to silence him about that portion of the Iran-Contra stuff? It's hard to say, but that's where it gets kind of crazy.
Well, let me ask you, if you were in charge for a day in the Reagan administration, what would you have done? Being a patriot that you are. Right. What do you think you would have done?
Well, if
now you got to remember, what was the underlying tone that Reagan's policy to obliterate communism, correct?
Right, absolutely.
At the end of the day, that was top of the list, number one. He even used bold ink on that. The rest of them were kind of pencil. But so with that in mind, and asking yourself, I'm an intelligent man, I'm a patriot. I'm going to do the right thing before I say this, that, or the other thing. I'm going to put myself in his position and just ask myself, what would I do?
Right.
And then, then as an educated person, I can go back and make educated guesses or conduct the research necessary. Yeah. So was that really happening? Was Reagan really behind this thing? If I was a betting man, I'd say yeah. But because you got to remember what the whole purpose of life was for his, what was the number one agenda, right? So for the Cuban-backed rebels to be successful would not be tolerated.
No.
And for us to do anything that we could to disrupt that would be obviously the first thing, because we fight pseudo wars, especially back then. Yeah. And in order to pay for it, it's called creative financing. We all do it every single day in our checkbook. But, when you're dealing in millions and billions, and potentially trying to hide it all at the same time, let's face it, if it wasn't approved by Congress as covert funding early on, let's say I'm sure nowadays things might have been a little bit different. And since we weren't there, we don't know, but maybe it was just the manner in which, Ollie North and the crew were able to put together, a plan that was going to work, because the agenda was what? It was obliterate communism no matter what, because that was the number one thing that had to be done. So, you got to ask yourself, are we breaking the law? I mean, it's sort of like, what law is there? There was no law in Panama while Noriega was in charge. It was his law. I remember, because I deployed to Panama during when he was in power, and then after. So there was a huge difference. And I'll tell you, it was a little unnerving at times. We weren't really allowed to leave the base and go frequent any of the little bars in town. But, as young, frogmen do, we tend to use our well-honed, stealth skills and that's what it was. And let me clarify. This was in no way an attempt to be insubordinate with our senior officers and enlisted men, but we were in training, and this was just strictly training. So our ability to slip out and into the populace and blend in, and of course we'd get hungry, so we didn't bring MREs, because that would peg us as I'm kidding, right? And then we would slip back in, and it was just really good training. But there was this one place, I think the name of the bar was called My Place, and believe it or not, and we would always go to the back of the place, because there was this a rumor that you could get grenaded if you hung up front. Never even knew if it was possible, but damn sure if it didn't happen. And the night that it happened, there were there were some Marines or somebody had snuck out, and they were in that place, and they were having a good time, and someone tossed a grenade in there, and I don't know if anybody died. Nobody died, but they did get hurt. And because it all depends on what kind of grenade it is and where it goes and how it explodes. I mean, they're powerful weapons, but they can be. It might have gone into a corner behind. I don't know what the deal was, but a couple guys got hurt. It wasn't too serious, and they had to get them carted out of there. Went back to the base, and there was this big investigation, big shutdown. But we had slipped out the back that night and got back, so it was pretty crazy. That was the Noriega days, and then afterwards, none of that shit happened. So. Yeah, it was, Noriega was probably like an effective asset at one point, because he was able to get the job done. But then as he started to rise and create his own power structure, and he kind of lost it, man. He was God knows he was doing his own dope. But he provided a very important service for the cartels. Was he allowed them to come and go as they please and pass, and he was able to launder money for them, all day long. And that's really the heart of, that transaction is really the bulk cash smuggling and all that kind of stuff. So, and this was prior to using signal intelligence to, what we refer to as counter threat finance now, where, you've got, federal agencies and international agencies and law enforcement and Interpol and different entities in the law enforcement world, international and national, that their capabilities were not at hyper levels at that time. And to be able to integrate, say, a military asset like signal intelligence with that, you figure, what if you've got 15 or 16 different law enforcement agencies from, South Carolina down 95 all the way over to El Paso, Texas, and they're all doing great stuff, but they're limited in their ability to, create that spider web of assets and CIs. And then all of a sudden, you imagine integrating the signal intelligence capability of, say, the National Guard, and then all of a sudden, boom, it opens up, and all those little spider webs start connecting, and then you can really, and that's how you track the money. And that's something that we we've been able to integrate now in recent times. Why we didn't think of it then? Maybe things were a little bit different. Maybe there were policies. Maybe there were people in charge that just didn't like that idea. It's hard to say. But, I think that there's a lot more cohesive union among, units and elements. Of course, there's still sandboxes. But back then, those things were – imagine the hurdles that the administration of Reagan was trying to create had to go through when, like, all the different agencies, they really didn't function well together, and not really by them fault. I mean, it's what it is. I mean, we all, we've been around long enough to be able to understand how that works. So was that conspiracy? Not really. It was just kind of a lack of, collaboration and maybe philosophy. The FBI guys don't think like the DEA guys.
And getting back to like with Reagan, I agree with you 100% on. I think his actions and what his administration did with as you said, Ollie North and all the boys to fund this fight against the Soviets in South America. I mean, I know a couple of guys that are old timers that were running guerrilla units against each other in South America, just to stir the shit up, right? To cause chaos and cause problems with the communists, and then arming the boys in Afghanistan to cause the Russians, a lot of problems, and it eventually bankrupted them, right? It eventually bankrupted them, and
there's no doubt about it. There's no doubt about that. That's a really, really, it's, man, I'll tell you, mixing, what went on in Afghanistan and that part of the world with what goes down in Central and South America, kind of like apples and goldfish, It's like a whole fundamental difference in just the way people think, and it's very interesting. Like think about the Colombians and the assistance that we provided to Colombia for so many years. They're not as rudimentary as you think they are. They're pretty damn squared away at doing what they do. Right. Flashback to the 80s with the Mujahideen in Afghanistan and the Russians trying to make that big push, using Afghanistan as their highway. They're taking giant bulldozers and just bulldozing through, straight path to wherever they wanted to go. They're dropping cluster bombs on every single knoll that possible. So if anybody tried to like climb up onto a higher elevation and shoot down on them and create like an ambush scenario and have even a fighting chance, 9 out of 10 times they blow half their body off. But now all that stuff's still up there. Roads, everything was mined, bombed, and then you'd have these big highways, these bulldozers, and this air power just driving through, destroying everything. I mean, there's no doubt that it would be a Russian Afghanistan right now had the Stinger missile not been introduced to the fighting force at the time. And it was a very, very small contingent of very, very brave intelligence officers who worked in the paramilitary capacity, which we still have today. This is, and this was still kind of like the guys that it really kind of started in the Vietnam time frame, and the special forces guys were well integrated with them. And you see movies all the time, and some of the depictions are really good, but then nowadays it's more of a real no shit fighting force made up of high end heavy hitters that every individual guy is already very highly trained. So would things have gone a lot quicker and been a lot different if that scenario occurred today? Probably. But at the time, it just took a while, really, from a political standpoint, and to really get those guys to fight. You got to remember, they're like, and I'm not trying to disrespect anybody, and that goes for, any Afghan out there that might be a listener. But to be honest with you, when I was preparing for Afghanistan, I didn't have a whole lot to go on. I read all the books with regards to how the Russians did it, read all the books on how we did it, and there wasn't a whole lot of data. And I got the most value, this is early on, this is right after 9/11, okay? This is, like into 2002, into 2003. I got the most value, believe it or not, out of reading about how did our cavalry handle the Apache and the Southwest Indian uprisings back in the day when it was tough to do. Have you ever driven around Arizona? You ever just driven around Arizona and seen how vast that land is and how every crevice and it's like a giant, McMuffin. It's like you can hide in a billion different places. Right. And, if we're talking like, people being able to know the lay of the land and taking pot shots at a cavalry. Now, you got to remember, cavalry guys back in that time frame, this is like 1860s, okay? These are hardened guys. These are guys that have fought in war before. These weren't just your average run-of-the-mill jackass, grunt. These guys knew how to fight. They were a well-oiled machine. And you're sending the best of the best in there, but it took serious tactics. Well, I got a lot of value out of reading all the Apache agent books and anything I could get my hands on with regards to that, because it really helped. And this is like I was fortunate to be a part of a group of guys. It was kind of like a rap patrol, They gave me a terp. They gave me 50 guys, 50, I'll call them Afghan Rangers, for lack of a better term. I mean, they were the best trained guys that I could get, and I trained them myself for the most part. And of course, they were handed over to me from another great guy, and I just really kind of just drove around looking for the bad guys. Kind of sounds stupid, but, like, what else are you going to do? Intel was tough to get out in a place like imagine Chiricahua Mountains. You're going in there looking for Cochise. It's not an easy task.
So were you up in the Hindu Kush area quite a bit then?
I was fortunate to get an opportunity to pretty much go all over the place there. Maybe it was just because there was few of us at the time, and they needed to, kind of throw us at every problem that there was. It wore you out. We were there for long periods of time. As we started to grow our forces, things improved significantly, and we were able to have this group of guys will stay here, this group of guys will stay there, and kind of handle it. It's always better to know your land, your area better. But I mean, there was times, I'd be in Kabul, and hey, we're going down to host to, there's an issue, there's a problem down there, so let's go. Next thing you know, I'm on the Pakistan border, and I'm going through UBL's old caves that have been bombed by those. You realize
the shit you're talking about right now is like, you've got to be a serious badass to just go riding around Afghanistan kicking people's asses.
Right.
Or you're just a complete moron who doesn't know the
highly trained fucking badass.
I'm going to give my my Marine and my SF buddies credit where credit is due, because quite frankly, as a SEAL from the mid '80s all the way into the late '90s and 2000 I wasn't trained as an infantry soldier. I was a navigator, what in the Navy we call a quartermaster. In the Army, that's like a supply guy, but in the Navy, it's like a navigator of a ship. And I was in the fleet for a year, and that was my training. Okay, and I came from being the son of a Navy pilot, a Naval Academy grad, 1963. In fact, my dad just died March.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. He passed away in March.
Greatest man alive.
Quite a man, huh?
Yeah, thank you. And and so I grew up in San Diego and Virginia Beach, and it was funny because that's where the SEAL teams are, and here I'm from there. And there was another guy, one of my closest friends, his nickname's Hamster. I'll throw his name out there. He's one of the baddest men alive, and he we grew up there. But what did we know? We barely made it through high school. I'm surprised the Navy even took us. But for us to be able to get into a situation like that, we had a lot of training. We didn't have these one little skill that you really need to know when you're setting up these types of base camps in these vast, massive mountainous areas. I'm not talking Iraq. I'm not talking about, no offense, but cruising around in Suburbans at light speed at sea level with little birds flying overhead and using their very, very well developed cell phone system and that they have in Iraq to be able to track and locate. No, we didn't have any of that. If you were lucky, you might have a Thuraya, one like what camel jockeys would carry, and if that battery even worked, because they dry out pretty quick. But we're out there, and if one of my first trips, I was with an old Marine gunny sergeant, and this guy, I tell you what, this guy knew more about setting up things, doing this, that, all just straight up infantry stuff. And the guy kept us alive. I remember one night we went into this is when we were down near the border and we were down near those caves. And of course you're being watched the whole time, and we would kind of convoy into a little area. Sometimes we'd have too many vehicles, so we'd have to dump some off at one of the bases. But we get too many vehicles, and with the lights on, because we didn't have IR lights at the time for the other guys and nods and all that, is we kind of look like you ever seen that movie, The 13th Warrior? It's the five. That's what it kind of looked like coming down the mountain, So we tried to avoid the fireworm. And we would come into a place and we would set up camp during the day, and at nighttime, of course, we'd set some fires and things like that, and we'd slip out the back, Jack. And damn near every single time that freaking camp would get hit every night. Now, I mean, it's kind of like that's a duh moment, right? But those are things that I could just common sense and intuition will help me get through. But it's the other stuff I didn't have. And the SF guys that I did some great work out in Yemen with some of the special forces guys. These guys just knew exactly how to set up and train an army. It was just very impressive stuff. And these are just like 1-2 guys. That's how they work. So, and it was great. And of course, I was able to pass on my knowledge. When we got into the real nitty gritty of the training, all the shooting, all the real, high end stuff, and make the people we were working with just 10 times more effective, which protected me as well. And they've got a real good fighting force. That's where my expertise came into play as well. So, I give credit where credit is due, but times have changed, man. Times have definitely changed.
And, with Afghanistan, and saying of Afghanistan's history is where empires go to die. And we've been there forever, right? Russia fell apart because of it. They spent so much money there, but mostly there, but elsewhere around the world, dealing with Reagan and his tactics. But really, Afghanistan has crushed a lot of empires. A lot of people have tried invading there, and things have not worked out. We've been there forever.
Been there a long time. 2017, we went there right after September 11th. So
yeah. So these are tough people, and the terrain, as you mentioned, virtually impossible to conquer. Are we just doing just enough to be in there doing what we need to do? I mean, are we going to end up sending massive amounts of troops back there? Do you think Trump ends up doing that? I mean, it's at what point do you say, this is not going to work?
We didn't have ISIS to deal with back then.
Right.
So, our biggest concern was crush the Taliban, basically the mob of Afghanistan.
Yeah.
Highly entrepreneurial, ruthless. It didn't take long to drive them into the trees. Yeah. So Al-Qaeda, on the other hand, they were just as much in the dark. They were fish out of water in Afghanistan as well. But they're from those types of third world shitholes, so they maybe felt a little bit more at home than. But you got to remember, they were foreigners for the most part. And unless we're talking about some of the highly trained guys like the Chechens. Right? Pardon, I didn't catch that one.
I mean, yeah, there were Chechens, guys from the stands, all that, right?
Yeah, and so they were foreigners there too. So in my humble opinion, I believe that actually gave us an advantage because they weren't on an equal playing field with us, but we were both on that field. So here it goes. Once they weren't harbored and hidden by the Taliban. And they basically were given, the ability to do that. I mean, let's face it, were they in Iran? And if they weren't, why? And if Iran hates the way ISIS does business and they're against that, these Shiites versus this Sunni problem, why now the difference, and why was there a protection? Who's to say there wasn't an agreement, between them at the time, which no longer exists. UBL's gone, Al-Qaeda's fairly decimated in a lot of ways. Of course, they survive in, places in Sudan and things of that nature where, we're limited at what we're doing there. You could say that about so many things, like, Africa, Coney, the hunt for Coney. Could we find him? What do you think?
Yeah.
Is that what we need to do right now? Is that where the focus needs to be? I mean, quite frankly, if you were in charge for a day and you had limited resources, you're going to have to think about, let's pull back and think about what's important to Americans.
Right.
And, we don't want to say that ridding the world of evil is a bad thing, but at the same time, we just can't do it all. And it doesn't help us politically. But why the ISIS threat against Iran just recently? You don't think that ruffled some feathers? You don't think that there's going to be some issues that come out of that, some good study? The Rand race is probably going to have 10 people assigned to a new, so, I'm interested about that kind of stuff. But it's difficult to predict it. Afghanistan is just a hole that it's real tough to do anything there. It rains for months and then it turns into a giant mud pit. And unless you're flying over the shit, and you can't fly anything because it's so high up, you can't fly like, the types of birds we're used to transport.
Air's too thin, right?
Hawks and little birds. It depends on what time of the year. The winter is a little bit easier, but they gotta be big birds. Mi-17s, they got a lot of lift, carry a lot of people, but they gotta carry a lot of fuel if they're gonna go very far. A lot of fuel means a big giant fuel blivet. Big giant fuel blivet means they got hit. You're a big giant fireball. Right. But all these things pose interesting problems. Not everything's solved. I mean, certainly we've got the place fairly wired at this point, but do we dump more resources there? I don't know. We have to deal with ISIS now, and that's a real no shit threat.
Right. And fast forwarding to ISIS now, we talk about and I've got a couple friends that have some technology that they've been, helping the U.S. government, border stuff, surveillance stuff, all kinds of things. And you talked about the web and how things are connected now. We can track things. We can track funding. We can track, all this sort of stuff. What I find peculiar with ISIS is, there's over 4 years ago, John McCain goes to Syria and meets with the Air Fingers quote, the way Wilkow says it, the Free Syrian Army. And in that meeting, and there's pictures of it, of the broadcast on ISIS, of the video of McCain sitting there with guys who are bad dudes, and they're at the time Free Syrian Army. Well, one of these guys turns out, and I've talked to several guys, and maybe you've seen the pictures, maybe you haven't. This guy looks a lot like Baghdadi, who's sitting in that meeting, and I'm sitting there saying to myself, okay, one, he looks an awful lot like Baghdadi with short hair. Two, and I know we had him in our custody. I think it was in Iraq. He gets released. Now all of a sudden he turns back up, leader of ISIS. Why, with all our technology to be able to track funding and all this sort of stuff, why can't we never hear the media talk about where's the oil money? Who's doing the banking for ISIS's oil money? Because we know they were collecting millions and millions of dollars a day for their oil. A 40,000 man army doesn't just appear out of nowhere. That sort of stuff that bothers me, because I don't want to see Americans die. As much as I love training and training with law enforcement, military, as much as I support all those guys, I don't want to see them die for political purposes, whether it's, look, if the American petrodollar dies, which I think that's part of the Syrian deal, suddenly we're paying $10 a gallon for gas and the economy goes to shit and our quality of life goes with it. I get all that. But at the same time, we're losing lives over stuff that I think, where Reagan was just in what he did in bringing down communism, this deal in Syria, I'm a little sketchy on, to be honest with you.
I think Syria is just basically nut rolled out of control. And, like anything else, you let something go, you let an engine or a transmission problem go too long. You may be able to get it to crank up and drive to the beach, but you don't know if you're going to be able to get back. There's a lot of shit going on, and you don't have the money to fix it. You don't really want to take the time. it's just really out of control, and to reel it all back in and figure out how to fix it once it's already broke, it's a big task, and I think that nobody could have predicted that. I think obviously there was a lot of people that did, but nobody could have predicted exactly what was going to happen. I think they don't give a shit about anybody. I think that one of the problems is if it was just left up to us, I think we could probably get a wranglehold on it and get things under control one way or the other. Americans have a real good knack of figuring shit out pretty quickly and decisively taking action, and usually in a very precise manner. But when that doesn't work, we're really, really good at smashing fucking square pegs through round holes. I mean, we're really good at it. And those pegs just go a-falling. So if first you don't succeed, then smash their fucking heads in. But I don't know, how's that going to play out? Where's the real rift? Where's the real massive overwhelming problem of radicalization right now? We can't change that, where that's happening. We're seeing it on the news every day. We just saw it in London, and had it not been the London Bridge attack, to have one guy, one hooligan stand up and kick some ass while three assholes come in there and try and stab everybody just goes to show you that, patriotism is not dead yet in some parts of other countries, but that problem is rampant now. What do you do? How do you reel that in?
Right. But is it, that's the thing is, this, I remember I've been flying long enough, Woody, that security wasn't all that strict. And with the obvious terrorist attacks that have happened with the growth in my neighbor, who's Muslim, he's a doctor, orthopedic surgeon. He and I talk real frankly about stuff, and he talks about, certain Muslim sects that are attacked by the Sunnis. Sunnis are attacking pretty much everybody. I mean, is it the Sunnis that are the major problem? Because there's peaceful Muslims out there, obviously, that are being attacked by these extremists also. But how do you thin the herd and know who to let in? This clash of civilizations is obviously not working.
Well, you pose a tough question, Pat. I think if we're talking strictly an immigration policy that is equal, why can't everybody go through the exact same process?
Right.
The exact same way.
Yeah.
Because if our vetting nothing's perfect, but it's at least in place and it works. And it doesn't just work if you're like a good guy. It works because it's going to pick out anomalies and maybe we'll get a little bit better at that. But if there's instances where there are people that are able to skirt that process, how does that make any sense at all? So that's one. It's like Britain.
It's like Britain and America. We know hundreds of people have gone and actually fought for ISIS, and their passports aren't taken, and they're not deported. They're allowed back into the country. Is that probably, stating the obvious, probably allowed back in so surveillance can be kept on them and we can track, who they're working with and all that sort of stuff. But obviously these loose cannons have broken loose before and killed people, just like what happened in London, where they knew some of these people had already gone over, fought for ISIS, things like that, they were born in London, but they were radicalized and things like that. So it's, at some point you got to go, you know what? If you go fight for ISIS, you're not coming back, period.
Look, if we had a church here in the United States that was creating some sort of, I'm not talking onesies and twosies, okay? I'm talking on a massive scale like there is over in Europe. It was creating this type of radicalization, regardless of the religion. Just say it's anything. Let's say we'll make up a religion. We'll call it the religion of the crow.
We'll say something bad about Jesus and I'll cut your head off.
No. I love Jesus.
That type thing. And
but the thing is if if that were to occur here, we would shut that shit down. Because, first of all, no American wants that. Not even the assholes. Not even the uber liberal. They don't want that stuff. You saw what happened after 9/11. Everybody was coming out of the woodwork. They were freaking singing Kumbaya. They were giving everybody the big group hug, and the Barney song was coming out every 5 seconds. You know, that's what happens, and that's what would happen. So they don't want it any more than we do. The problem is we shut that shit down. We're planning ahead. We don't allow that type of thing to occur in the manner that it is over there. And it's a fundamental, philosophy. It's open border policy in a lot of ways over there. And if you have an open border policy among all the countries in a big giant fucking area like Europe, does that mean what defines a country in the first place?
Yeah.
A border?
There's no sovereignty.
So, and maybe I'm just, I'm speaking like a third grader here, but if there's no borders, there's no country.
Exactly.
Where does the nationalism, the feeling of patriotism, where does that go?
Yeah.
See, that it's a fundamental issue, man. So how do you fix that? I'll be honest with you, man. I don't know if there's anything we can do, but what we can do is consistently stop it here. And thank God we're surrounded on two sides by water, and we've got Mexico and Canada on the top and the bottom. And the best that we can do is what we're trying to do, without getting into any. I won't talk about Mexican politics. I won't do it. So not today. That's too deep, man. You get me in trouble. But I'll be the first guy. Like I said, I wrote a movie. I've got several that I've been working on in different other projects. But the bottom line is even in the movie fiasco, it was a political fuck up, and guys died, and nobody wants to look bad when that happens. And I just think it's an injustice. That's why I wrote about it. And that's my own country. Imagine writing about, imagine the crazy shit that goes on in some of these other places, and I'm as fundamental about my religion as any hardcore Muslim would be about their religion. But I'm not out whacking people.
Exactly. Because
as a human being, I want to be a part of the human race. And it's not necessarily what I believe. It's just, there's a right and there's a wrong, and you got to make a choice. There's no in between. And I don't know, but if there's
speaking about, to go back to a little bit on politics with the rules of engagement stuff that you guys had to deal with, and it got worse and worse and worse your time in, and it's out of control still. Maybe it's a little better now with the new president and Madison and things like that, where maybe they're shutting down some of the folks on the other side on these rules of engagement. But what's some of the stuff that you guys had to deal with?
I worked for General Mattis when I was at Joint Forces Command, and I actually was one of the counter-threat finance officers there. And so that's why, I have an interest in that area. And then we work closely with counter-narco-terrorism elements in the United States and the National Guard, and fusing those things together. But Mattis, he's truly the essence of calm in the storm. Literally, he's a hurricane. He's the human hurricane, and it's like, he's all Marine, and he instills a good dose of confidence in all things that you do. He required most of the senior guys he had a book list. You had to read all the books on his book list. And very philosophical, very intelligent man. But he's hardcore as shit, and I love it. I mean, I truly do love it. And then everybody else that they've surrounded themselves with. So it's kind of an exciting time, to see, the way that's going. He's also in a position where, we can't just go out there, and raise the black flag and start slitting throats. I mean,
right.
It's not going to happen, as much as we feel that way sometimes. So that's kind of the flip side of it. I guess if another, God forbid, anything like 9/11 ever happened in some capacity, I'm pretty damn sure we would have. I mean, I remember the orders that George Bush, President Bush, put out were to capture and kill Al Qaeda. Okay, what else, sir? That was it. So interpret that any way you want. Yeah. So it was pretty damn cut and dry. And what does that remind you of? Reminds you a little bit of the Reagan policy, in my opinion. It was like, we will obliterate communism at all costs. Not at all costs meaning to the cost of every American, because that's counterintuitive and goes against the thinking of everything he stood for. I mean, how many times have you watched a speech where Memorial Day is a classic example. You watch on YouTube and you watch these things. It's hard for him to keep a dry eye in his own speeches. I mean, I'll tell you right now, I truly can connect with people like that. Right. And it's a beautiful thing. That's true American.
And the thing about that, the thing that's cool about that, because I'm old enough to remember Reagan, and I remember the fact that he was a liberal at one time, and he converted, and he made a true conversion over to being a true conservative for the most part, and really hardcore patriot, which was awesome. And do you believe Trump's done the same thing? Because Trump at one time was basically a Democrat, and from what I can tell, for the most part, besides the hemming and hawing on the Obamacare stuff and wanting to give everybody free stuff again, and we don't need to get into is healthcare a right and all that.
We're not talking about healthcare tonight.
No, but
unless I can get like a couple bowls of Cocoa Puffs, just with sugar.
But do you think Trump's made that same switch?
Okay, here we go again. We got apples and goldfish. But at least there's both foods. I think Reagan was, coming from his background as a celebrated actor, a man with just loads and loads of genuine American confidence. 9 out of 9 times he played the part of the hero cowboy or cavalryman that saves the day in the end and rescues the damsel in distress, and just the most wholesome of wholesomes. But as we know, you tend to lean a little bit left, in that industry, and I see it all the time. And I know tons and tons and tons of really great actors and producers and directors and people in that field that they're very much conservative in every right, and they just don't speak out, because you're not going to get very far if you do, because the people that really kind of control things like that, it's just better to but it's okay to be that way in America. All right, that's the thing. But when we look at President Trump, he comes from a different background. He's not an actor. And not taking into consideration the TV shows that he's been in, which are they're all really entertaining. I like reality TV, quite frankly, but he's in a lot of ways he's very much like that, but he's very, very different. And I think what I'm saying here.
He's not well spoken like Reagan was.
You don't get as far as in business at the level of business that he's doing and make the kinds of deals that you do if you're Donald Trump without breaking some eggs along the way and having to cut deals with like true assholes. I mean, we're not talking the real estate and construction and building deals that he's doing in America with the assholes that he has to deal with. It's not like in Japan where nobody does anything in that realm without dealing with the Yakuza, right? You get my point. So I mean, you want an example of some real fucked up shit, there you go. But one thing Trump is doing that Reagan did, here's this likeness, is they said they're going to do something, and they're really no shit doing it. Now back when Reagan was in play, that was not uncommon for a guy to do what he says he's going to do, especially the hero of the movie.
Yeah.
When he says, I'm going to rescue you no matter what, goddamn, he's going to do it. So for years and years and years, that's the narrative that everybody's been hearing. So now he's president. Is it any different? Truly. Now, it's a little bit different for Donald Trump because we see him as like, you're fired. It's sort of like, or, you hear about business deals or you talk to your New York City cop friends that might know, more, a little bit more about what's going on, and there's some shiesty shit going on. But you know what? I wouldn't be able to speak to that type of, the real estate, the big time, building real estate world of New York City. So I'm going to stay out of that one. But, I will say that the guy said he's going to do X, Y, and Z, and by God, he's doing it. And nobody's used to it. And I think a lot of the problem is they didn't think that he'd get elected, which is kind of stupid. But when he did get elected, they don't believe that a guy like that will ever come through what he wants to do.
Hold on one sec. My co-host argued with me and didn't think he was going to get elected. Remember that, Jeff?
I do.
Hey, keep that thought. I got to plug this computer in. It's sitting right here.
Yeah, right, that's not an unfounded skepticism. I mean, you don't get much more establishment than Hillary Clinton, and I just, by hook or crook, I just swore she was going to do it, man. I just, history proves that.
And really, that's not even like the sensational part of it. The sensational part, to answer your question, Pat, is, when you look at what Trump has done in the past and his background, it wouldn't be an uncommon thing to not believe that he's going to follow through on what he's doing because of the environment that he comes from and the types of work that he did. But not Donald Trump. It's just too easy to believe him. Do you see my point? So comparing them is just not fair, even though they're both getting the same job done that they wanted to do. I don't know. There's a lot of good conservative actors, producers, directors out there,
Yeah, and I work in the TV world for a lot of years.
Steven Seagal.
I work with a lot of liberals and stuff, and I get along with them fine. We have a drink and debate and stuff and have a good time, but I'm still friends with them, still love them like a brother. I'm on the road with them every week. We don't let it get in the way of our work.
Not out of our problem. But at the end of the day, we're Americans. It's not like we're having to deal with other entities. I was going to say that, working closely with Steven Seagal over the years, love him or hate him, it doesn't really matter, whether you knew this or not, and you probably do. Overseas, the guy is as popular as he was in the 90s. There's absolutely no doubt he's a freaking phenom. He can't go anywhere without being completely swarmed. Right. I'm a broken old man at this point, and I'm playing like additional PSD guy, went up in the mountains of Kyrgyzstan because they're putting on some giant horse expose where they're lighting guys on fire. I mean, the amazing shit that I've seen traveling the world, including Moscow, for an abundance of time with this guy. But he's extremely conservative, and I wouldn't say right wing, because I don't like that term so much, because that sounds like a nasty word. But he's very, very conservative. He's absolutely pro-American. And the funny thing is, he was born in Detroit. He grew up in the ghetto. His dad did everything he can to, he grows up in a primarily a black area, and he learns how to play multiple instruments. He's a phenomenal fucking guitarist, probably one of the best ever I've ever seen. Wow. I can send you some video. And then the guy goes to California because he's really, really interested in martial arts after seeing it, and that's all part true. Then he goes over to Japan for 20 years and legit first guy to run a dojo as an American, a white guy, a Westerner, because his father-in-law basically gave it to him. And every single night, how many kung fu movies and karate movies have we watched growing up over the years? And I love them today, Master Killer and shit like that. But like legit, and this is no shit, the guy every single night of his life, when he took over that dojo, was challenged, just like in those movies. Yeah. And he had to fight him. And this is, back in the day, in Japan, and see, you can add credence to this. Japan's a lot different of a kind of a place. When guys square off, it could go all the way. Yeah. It's like us in America. We've got, is just not the same. It could go all the way 9 out of 10 times. That's how it starts. And there may be that, that point where, there's not a death involved. But if there was, there's a likelihood you can get away with it.
Yeah, I'll tell you a story. And this gives it credence, and this is legit. First Japanese guy that I ever fought was my first mixed martial arts fight in a $5,000 winner-take-all 8-man tournament. No weight divisions, no rules, no time limits. And my first fight was against a guy named Yasunori Matsumoto, who was 2-time judo champion of Japan and 2-time Kyokushin champion of Japan, bare knuckle fighter from Japan. And this guy was legit tough. Now I was able to out wrestle him. I got him in an armbar. Mind you, this is my first ever MMA fight. So I get him in a tight elbow lock, and his elbow tendons and ligaments start snapping like guitar strings, and he's not tapping. So then the capsule breaks, his arm breaks backwards, and he rolls and he escapes out of the submission. We scramble back up to our feet. I shoot another double leg on him, and he puts me in a choke, a guillotine choke, with the arm that I just dislocated. And he had me in the choke for like 2 minutes before I finally escaped that, took him down and choked him out. And so I went, so this is my first fight, literally almost to the death. And I went, what the fuck am I doing here, man? This is some crazy shit. So you're completely right.
It's a warrior mentality. And I don't say, we use the term warrior so lightly nowadays because it's like on everybody's, kids have little apps and about the little warrior. But we're talking, let's have a flashback in time, 1970s or earlier. Warrior meant something back then. And it means something now. Don't take that the wrong way, but and I admire that a lot. I mean, because you going toe to toe, that's Mortal Kombat. I mean, it truly was, Pat. And Steven, he's shared these stories with me, and he's dead serious. Now, these are really fucking interesting things that happen in his life that really nobody knows about. Yeah. And that it makes him incredibly interesting because all you see is no different than the late great Bruce Lee. If you really knew him and several people, in like Danny and Asanto's camp and those guys, they were super tight. There was all this stuff. He was not the person that you see on the screen. And it's so different because a lot of people may have had a negative, something negative to say about Steven. But I'll tell you what, the guy goes out of this country and he is treated with respect and he gives it back. And he kind of gets a raw deal, and let's face it, he's 65 years old. And I'll tell you right now, bro, he's a formidable man. He is a very large, big, giant, strong guy, especially at 65. He's got no health problems. He's got hands as big as two of mine. And just by the size and mass, just by mass alone, think of it like a catapult. You put a rock in a catapult, but the rock's glued inside and it comes down and slams. Even if it really doesn't do anything but use a pendulum effect. And this as a fighter, about angles and move. I remember when you were teaching me and Scott about angles and just the boxing, the boxing acumen that I learned in that 1-2-day seminar that we put on out here with the Virginia Beach at the police department. That was the most incredible experience with boxing that I've ever had in my life. 100%. Just because you talked about angles and the way to do it, but at a mastery level. Like I'm getting 20 plus years of your mastery in like 5 minutes, and you boiled it all down to kind of like Bruce Lee effect, right? You're giving me the best of the best. And so to give you that back in this other story, and that's how it, imagine just getting hit with a giant hand connected to a giant arm, connected to a giant body, that just a double leg, take him down would be an effort in itself.
Yeah, I've been hit by big guys like that. It's not pleasant.
Yeah, and you've trained some of the biggest clobber houses in the world out there.
Sylvia.
Oh my God, I remember like it was yesterday, And who thought that dude was clobbering time, like the Thing, and right. It was just great to watch. Those are the fun days, and and I saw Matt Hughes when we were at the SHOT Show, like two SHOT shows again, and he was hanging out with a bunch of people. It was pretty good. Some people just don't ever get older looking. I just get older looking every 5 seconds. I don't know what the deal is.
You look the same, actually. No, but Matt's legitimately freak strong for his size. But but the cool thing when team guys used to come out, we'd get groups of like 30, 40, whatever, would come out to Iowa to train with my fight team. And they'd show up, and still to this day, the coolest thing I've ever received from anybody, not to put anything down, I get stuff from, a lot of coins, a lot of shirts, a lot of hats, a lot of that stuff. But a guy who was a team leader for SEAL Team 6 carried a flag into a mission and wrote me a letter after that, and just said he carried the flag into that mission and said thanks for all the training and all that sort of stuff. That thing right there is the coolest thing I've ever gotten from anyone. It meant the most to me.
That's really
just
cool,
because of the level, But all those guys, I tell people this story all the time, is fighters used to come to us from all over the world who were professional, legit, badass fighters. And after 3 days at my gym, because we'd always have 95-degree heat, every guy you grabbed was ranked in the top 10 in the world, 40, 50 guys. And pro fighters who were great fighters would just come into my office on Wednesday and go, I'm done, man. I can't handle this. This is insanity. And every time those groups of SEALs would come, they'd train with us all day long. They'd battle with us, the grappling practices, the sparring practices, all that sort of stuff. The team leader got knocked out by Drew McFedries. And I yelled at McFedries. I go, dude, he's got to go do a job after this. What are you doing? Don't fucking, beat him up. But don't.
What the fuck?
But not one time. And it's obviously what you guys have been through, the history of what you've had to do to become who you are as a special operator in the Navy. Not one Navy SEAL ever even remotely said, it was a joke to them, dude, because they'd been through BUDS, they'd been through everything else. And it was a joke, and the stories that I've heard out of you guys and my kid swim coach, and I'm going to tell this story before we get into your movies, and I want you to plug all your stuff and all of that. But my kid swim coach, when he started his swim team, we were at another team. My wife, I said, we're switching teams. We're going with that guy, and because he and I had talked a couple times, we kind of just started to get to know each other a little bit, and I liked him. I liked his mentality, of course, just because I knew what he'd been through. And my wife goes, no, all our kids' friends are at this other team and this and that. And I go, you want your kids to swim to make friends or get work ethic and become friggin' college grads because they paid for it themselves by kicking ass? And so we ended up putting him on his team, and he eventually, we'd become pretty close over the years. And he told me the story about going through BUDS, and you were one of his BUDS instructors. And something had happened. I can't remember exactly what it was, but he said, Woody made me, it was hotter than shit out, and Woody made me run up this water tower, and he made me run up it over and over, and I was dying, I was hurting, I was dehydrated, everything else, and every time I ran to the top of the water tower, I had to scream out this window or whatever, the rep that I had just done, and then that Woodie Mister is the greatest, and so he'd run up to the top, he'd scream, Woodie Mister is the greatest. And then run back down to the bottom, and then go back up. 2, Woodie Mister is the greatest. And then by the time he was ready to collapse, you knew obviously how to cool him down. You gave him some surf torture or whatever and cooled him back down. But he goes, Woody was the reason I made it through, because he brought it out of me, and he loves you, man. He thinks the world of you, and he remembers on a mission somewhere when you were obviously toward the end of your career with the Navy. You were still giving him tough love. Like you wouldn't even like at times talk to him. And he's like, that sumbitch is so tough. He goes, I'd want to go hang out with him and stuff, or go do stuff, or talk to him. And he'd be like, whatever, get away, young buck type stuff, But he goes, he respects you a great deal. He loves you a lot.
Did he ever tell you about climbing or any other stories about being on deployment, Romania or anything like that?
He told me about getting in trouble in Kosovo a little bit.
I'll tell you.
He said he wouldn't tell me what he did, but he legitimately could have got excused from duty real easily for what he did. But he also said there was a sniper on top of a mountain in Kosovo. And he said they dropped so much ordnance on top of the mountain that the mountain was 10 feet shorter by the time they got done.
He was one of the, our platoon got split up on that. He was in my platoon, and we had gotten a call at some point where there was an issue at the Albanian embassy, and they were looking at performing a neo, and throughout the course of the entire deployment, we were stuck on a Gator freighter, and it was really, really shitty conditions. They created like a berthing space out of it seemed like the old boiler room and shit, and when they got rid of them and replaced it with new engines, and it was hotter. You're sweating like a dog in a Chinese restaurant in this place, and it was just the worst experience ever. And we were all stuck down in there, and we're going into the scenario after scenario after scenario, but you get pretty bored out there. And usually what the Marines and like the Navy guys call SEALs on deployment on these MARGs is they say that SEAL stands for sleep, eat, and lift. And that's pretty true. That's all you kind of fucking do. But I remember we would go into all these places to do training. Like we went into Greece and all these different places, and we did all different kinds of stuff. We did ocean swims out in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. I'm talking where the big hungries are, Holmes. And we did we did like a lot of hook and pole, like lead climber stuff from the water when we were in Greece, Thessaloniki, I think we were, and we just did a lot of really cool shit because we had time to train, and we were on a MARG. And when you're on a MARG, you tend to pull into ports a lot of places, which allows you to work with, like in Turkey, we worked with the Turkish SEALs, and we were able to do all kinds of really cool shit. But the one thing that I always made sure that we did is I always felt bad for the recon Marines, and because they had back in this time frame, I think this was like 98. They had changed their name up a little bit. So the Force Recon guys had changed their name for a short period of time. They were calling themselves the Direct Action Platoon, the DAP, and they were on the big deck. They were on the other helo carrier. And we were stuck on the smaller one with the battalion recon guys. But there was tons of snipers in that group, and they had all gone to sniper school. These are younger guys, right? And it kind of reminds me of that movie Black Hawk Down. That whole slew of young guys, like the Young Rangers. That's what it was like in your mind, if you can picture it. But these guys. Guys can swim, run, they can do everything we can do. They just don't have our training. Let's give them the training. Let's do it. There'll be a force multiplier for us in everything we do, and why wouldn't we? It'll make you a better trainer. It'll make you feel better. It'll give you something. We train with these guys, taught them everything we knew. Guess what happens? We go in there for the Neo, and the colonel of the MEU is like in love with us because we've been taking care of his boys, and nobody takes care of his boys, right? Yeah. He's like, you SEALs are going in to secure the ambassador. The ambassador's at her at the housing complex, not at the embassy housing complex where she had holed up. And you guys are going to go in, boom, hit it hard. You're going to secure the area. Then I'm going to send my Marines in to do their thing. That's exactly what happened. And we kicked ass on that whole thing. That was badass. And I remember throughout the lot of the training we were doing, like we would go do we would split up a lot. Some guys would go do diving, and the other guys, like when we were in Romania, we went way up into the in areas like Transylvania, and we were doing all this like high angle climbing and all this stuff. And like Damien, like he always wanted to be a lead climber. He always had big interest, and I would always take a guy and really push him to do the most that he could do until he couldn't do it anymore, and then try again. And Damien was kick-ass, so I let him do the lead climb for that whole trip. It was really fun. And when we came in for this Neo, now we're sitting around, we got nothing better to do. Half the guys get pulled away because there was another threat in Africa, and we had to send half the guys down to down near the west coast, off the coast of Sierra Leone, on a PC in order to handle that, and we had to send a couple guys. In fact, Scott went on that because he speaks French, and so we sent him down. And so those guys disappeared. So we were kind of sitting around. We didn't have much to do, and I noticed that the general, the brigadier general that was in charge of this whole it was an exercise. It was a NATO exercise called Resolute Response. Can't believe I remember this shit. Maybe my memory's getting better. It must be the carrots. Anyways, I remember we were sitting there, and he was under a constant threat from the Egyptian Islamic Jihad at the time. And this is in downtown Albania, in Rihanna. So it was in in Toronto, rather. Excuse me, Toronto. And we were fixing to go back to the boat and get out of there. And I'll tell you who the general was in a second. And his colonel, his aide, full bird colonel, he's just standing there. And I turned to my lieutenant and I said, Lieutenant, we've got to take advantage of the situation. And my lieutenant was probably the best officer of Ryan Crowley. Give him props. Best officer I've ever worked for in my life. This guy was a total fucking badass. And, and he takes care of people too. Like even right now, he has this whole, this whole hockey thing for, kids, like disabled kids and all this stuff. So anyways, I'm with Ryan. I said, Ryan, we got to do something about this. We could do the PSD for the general and we could keep him secure and we could get some employment. So we're pitching, we're marketing ourselves. And, he's like, hey, go for it. So I turned to the colonel and I mentioned it to him. And I really played it up really hardcore. And he turns to the general and the general's like, make it happen. So we just scored like a major deal. Why? Because DevGru, at the time had flown in their like PSD guys to take over, watching the ambassador because that's one of their missions at the time. I don't know if they just had extra time on their hands. They usually don't, but at the time, I guess they had this little unit. So they came and took over. We were kind of out of work. And so we went to work. We did the PSD for the general for several weeks, and Damien was on that. And I handpicked all the guys because he was one of the best guys. I mean, he's got a great head on his shoulder, but he's a new guy. So I was limited because I had so many new guys, but you pick the best guys for the job. And I remember that, but it turns out, so the general was a 1-star at the time, Brigadier General, Amos. And as you know, he goes on to be a 4-star general, the Commandant of the Marine Corps, and the very first Commandant of the Marine Corps that wasn't an infantryman. He was an F-18 pilot. And I was his personal security officer, and I would switch out 12 on 12 off with Ryan Crowley. And, I got to know this guy really well. He's one of the nicest, most honorable men I've ever met in my entire life. And I'm talking about general here. And generally, you don't get to 4-star general level unless there's a lot of politics involved in that. Yeah. So I give full on kudos for that. And it's just kind of like, and I remember what happened is we did all kinds of really cool missions, and we brought the Marines in to like do sniper security coverage when we would have a helicopter come in and pick him up, let him down. We coordinated everything. It was badass. And at the end of the day, we did get in a slight ambush on one ride up to, we would go carve, helicopter, different means of transportation to keep switching it up because these jihadists were trying to take us out. And so we had gone up to look at the French were building a school at the top of the hill, and we ended up taking the vehicle that time. We kind of got into a little bit of an ambush. These guys with black ski masks jumped out. It was this big shit show, and my guys are hopping out of the vehicle with Uzis and we even had Mac 10s and shit back then. It was fucking badass. It was like like Escape from New York. We didn't have the big giant suppressor on there, but they're all jumping out. And I remember the colonel just slides down into the bottom of the seat and was like shitting himself, and I'm flying over the top of the seat on top of General Amos, and I don't know where the hell Damien was at that point, and that was what he was referring to with all that sniper fire, because they were taking it. They ended up bringing in these Cobras or whatever the French had. They just were bombing the shit out of that thing for a while. So at the very end of this whole thing, and we found like little hide sites for, SAM sites at the end of the runway to try and take out some of the Lear jets. And it was an interesting trip. Carabinieri was freaking the fuck out the whole time. And they do a really good job. They're really paramilitary. I didn't realize that at the time. But at the very end, we bring the general up. He's getting ready. He's climbing into the Lear jet. He's going to take off. I don't know if it was a G5 at the time. And he's going back to wherever he's going to go back to. I think he was in NATO at the time. And he turns to me and he goes, and I won't tell you what he said. It meant a lot to me. But he takes a star off of his lapel, off of his collar, and he hands it to me. And it was just like I've never had anybody at that level do something that you didn't have to do that. And it was just such a meaningful thing, because you were just telling me about the guy at 6 bringing you the flag and what meaning and that's my story to share with you. It just meant so much to me, and I have such a respect now. And then for Jim Mattis to work for him years later, and then for him to be Secretary of Defense now, is just like that's why I speak so highly of certain things. And I have good things to say about all my colleagues, my admiral, my frogman, admirals and things like that, Scott Moore and the whole lot of them. They're all badasses, love them to death. But I just, those are some of the story. That was just a real meaningful story, kind of connected to Damien in that way. So I'm kind of glad you brought it up. Made me kind of remember some shit, but.
So let's talk about movies. Let's talk about Splinter Cell. How fun was that to do?
Well, the irony with Splinter Cell was it was a former Navy SEAL who was aging, who went to a special intelligence, an operational intelligence unit, and in the game it was the NSA, which we know that would be fictitious. Who goes on to go on 50,000 different types of missions to rid the world of whatever bad things he needs to rid himself of. But the premise of the game was really what interested me the most. Not so much that they were like mirroring this character, but it was the fact that it was a stealth game, and if you could do like the entire game without killing anybody, I mean, that was like a super, super challenging thing. I'm sure many people did. I, of course, am not a huge video game master. I really did get into those types of thinking games. I spent a lot of time talking about the realisms of games like that, and of course, you don't want everything to be realistic in a game or a movie for that matter. It's just not as entertaining. It's rather boring. So you want there to be some sensationalism and have like specialty devices that you can shoot out of the weapon to give you like advantages. But at the end of the day, it was a really, really cool project, and I was able to work with Ubisoft, which they were stationed. Or it's not stationed, but they were headquartered out of Montreal at the time, and I had that's one of the greatest cities of all. To go up there, it's like going to France before it got overcome with shit show. It's like
my wife's from Montreal, so
I love that place. I mean, I really hey, next time you go, call me. We're going. We'll stay at the Sofitel, and we'll have a fucking kick-ass time. I mean, it's like
the women are amazing up there, aren't they?
They really are. I love that place. I really do. And people don't really realize it because they're so segregated from the rest of Canada in a way. Yeah. It's kind of an interesting place, and there's so much history. And they're based out of there. It was a fantastic project. Enjoyed it. They would bring me in from time to time to do, exclusives. I saw that the thing you said to me, or there was I was a lot younger when I did this one exclusive, where they were asking me questions and I would answer and I would relate it to how Splinter Cell is like to the real world stuff. And, I was in this one scene in there, and you can see it online on YouTube. I'm talking about less than lethal use, and at the time we really didn't have any like less than lethal field use like type stuff. Like a no shit field taser or a dart gun. Something that
less than lethal back then was a right hand of the job.
So I was saying, like in the real world, it's going to be lethal. It's going to be a rifle round to the gut, and then I said, or to the head, and then I looked at the camera and I was like, hopefully the head, and it was like this big like following, and people were like, what the fuck, you're crazy and all this shit. I'm like, well, what I was trying to get across is like, you're always taking a shot at the largest piece of body that you can. If you've got a headshot vice a body shot in a normal situation, non-armored or something of that nature, 9 out of 10 times you're gonna shoot whatever you can see. If you're in a barricaded situation and all that's shown is a guy's knee, what are you gonna shoot?
Right.
Shoot fucking knee. So and that's the mentality you have to have. Now, if this is going to be like a precision, a shot taking out like some sort of a hostage rescue scenario where you have a good cold beat on his head, yeah, of course you're gonna go for the highest percentage of lethality. But that was kind of what I was getting at. I wasn't,
right.
People take things the wrong way out of context all the fucking time, man. I tell you, it's like, but whatever, I don't care. Yeah, I did a couple of video games after that. I did Army of Two, which was like two crazed contractors, pseudo Blackwater guys. One guy's like the skinny, wiry, fast accurate guy, and the other guy's the big, hardcore, thug, bad smash, thing. And that went pretty well. But I haven't done, the video game thing in quite a while. I just kind of moved on from it.
So Atlantica Group now, you're CEO of Atlantica Group, right?
That's true. It's
tell us all your
when I started the company years ago, I was really focused on just entertainment consulting, and in any nature of that, writing, any other type of consulting, a lot of technical advisory stuff. It was kind of like the role I felt I fit best in. But over the years, I found that I can contribute a lot better to other areas, and when you get older and you're a former action guy, the way I look at it is because I have absolutely no skills that translate into the modern world. I'm not an electrician, and I'm really not even good at mowing the lawn. I'm best served in smoke checking people, and that really doesn't translate into the civilian world so much. So what I can contribute is all the crazy shit that's locked up in my cabeza. And so I figured, maybe I should start writing some of this stuff down. And as I started
for the layperson though, what is smoke checking? Hook me up with a little glossary definition on that.
That would be accurately pointing a weapon at an adversary that needs to go away, pulling the trigger, and that person goes away. So, you know what I'm saying?
So now I got to tell the story on smoke checking. When the first time I heard it, when I'm out in Virginia, and there's a bunch of guys there that are Naval Special Forces guys. Some of them just back from Afghanistan. And Woody's there, and Woody's like, "Hey, man, maybe I'll jump in on a little bit of this, get a little bit of workout in. These young guys in here, I want to check this out and learn a little bit maybe." And so he's in there working out, and I'm watching him, and I'm like, dude, I'm saying to myself, this guy moves really good. Like, this guy's legit, like, can fight with his hands. So I go, Woody, and he's quite a ways across the gymnasium, and they got wrestling mats down and all that. And I go, Woody, dude, what kind of black belts you got? You move pretty good. What kind of black belts you got? You got a black belt? And he goes, yeah, I got a black belt, Militich. And I go, what do you got a black belt in? And he goes, smoke checking, motherfuckers. I go, all right then. That's good enough.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I what I meant to say was I got a black belt in being a smart ass. So that's all, But I appreciate that.
Dude, the two Jewish guys that were working together, and they were telling me the story with the German Special Forces guy, and they were messing with him, right? And they're like, Hans, come here. And Hans walks over, and one of them says to the other one, hey, Hans, we were wondering how many Jews you can fit. And these are two Jewish guys that are Navy SEALs, right? And they're like, hey, Hans, and they're talking to a German. We know how sensitive Germans are about their history with the Jews and all that. And so they deliberately fuck with him, and they go, hey, Hans, we're kind of curious, how many Jews can you fit in a Volkswagen? And a lot of people have heard this joke before, but this poor German dude hasn't. And he's like, I don't know how many. And one of them goes, well, you get 2 in the front, 2 in the back, and like 50 in the ashtray. And
You just German, went there.
Now remember.
Oh, no.
But this German special, and look, I'm not saying this.
I know.
I've got tons of Jewish friends. I love Jews, so that's not the point. But the point was them messing deliberately with a German special forces dude and freaking him out. And the guy goes, "You cannot talk like this. Oh my God, this is horrible. You can't do this." And both of them look at him and go, "Shut up, Hans. We're Jews, you idiot."
Wow. Holy shit.
Yeah, I will say that sometimes team guys, the sense of humor is not always received well.
Well, they're twisted. I mean, they've been through some shit. They're hardcore. They don't.
It's not the first time we've been accused of a lack of sensitivity. But I can say that we do not get that training. We do not get sensitivity training in the Naval Special Warfare community, at least not when I was there. So, maybe that's a problem. Maybe we need to elicit that. But
well, you know that they also told me that they'd capture Taliban guys or Al Qaeda guys and zip tie the bag over the guy's head, the canvas bag or whatever, and start transporting, zip tie his wrists, and tell the translator to say, tell us where the explosives are, tell us where the cash is, the weapons and everything. Where's the stash at? And the guy wouldn't talk, and then they'd say, if you don't tell us, we're going to take your kids back to America and raise them as Jews. And the guy would freak out and start talking.
What's ironic is that they would have probably had to say that through an interpreter, and that interpreter probably thought that was all fucked up. So, God knows what really was said,
Well, they said that the guy would go, Durka, 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 Durka.
Oh, man.
Pat's working blue tonight. Pat's working blue.
I'm just telling stories, man.
I know.
Stories of these guys. But Woody, you got anything else to plug, buddy, before we let you go, man? We've kept you long enough.
Like I said, I'd really like to get the story out, even if it doesn't have the names of the guys in this production, because it's really interesting. We were talking about Reagan earlier and the things that he did when he was an actor and things of like nature, and the way he covered stuff, kind of beautifully. And, you look at some of the guys that are rather conservative in Hollywood today that have, quite a reputation for doing great works, movies and things of that nature. Mel Gibson's one that comes to mind immediately. And when you look at We Were Soldiers Once, for instance, I mean, you really got to kind of look at like the underlying tone of what's happening, and that's what I'm trying to cover in my movies and my writing is, no matter where you are in a situation similar in that movie, there was just like one shit show after the next. It was, how many layers of shit can we pile on this situation before it's completely dire, and then it goes past that into everybody dies and it's not a good movie anymore. But there's that underlying, it's the ability to write and the ability to direct where you've constantly got an underlying sense of hope. And no matter what happens, no matter how bad it can get, and this is how it is in real life in the teens. And this is why we'll be laughing after 3 days of rain, and the guys that go up to Bettendorf and they're sweating their ass off and they're dying, and it's just like, it doesn't matter how bad it gets. It's not about like owning the suck. It's about, just sitting there and laughing your ass off because it's so fucked up. It's funny. And it's because no matter what you do when you get through, like whether it's buds training or whether it's some of this other like really hard stuff, is just maintaining that underlying sense of hope no matter where you are, what you're doing, and that kind of translates into the biggest philanthropy piece that I have going on today is an organization called the Save Me Foundation.
Yeah. And
it started it started out as the Save Me campaign in an attempt to do nothing more really than to join forces with folks out there that are experiencing loss and suffering from loved ones and friends that are overwhelmed with opiate addiction, and they don't know how to get out. They feel that they don't have the type of knowledge that perhaps they should have. It's not easily accessible. The internet can teach you a million different things, but when you have a collaborative site where people are sharing, hey, this is what it looks like. Are you seeing little pieces of tinfoil roll it up on the floor? Are you seeing these little baggies? Those are pretty obvious signs, but what about the non-obvious stuff? And what about just putting out like information? There wasn't a real good place to find something like that where a lot of people were sharing like nuts and bolts of what to look for and what to do. And so I got pretty fed up when a very, very close family member got wrapped up into heroin, and right. I felt like this. It's time to act. It's time to take the ball cap off, with the camouflage ball cap off, and put one on that says "Save Me," and put yourself out there, be a little vulnerable, and ask for help. And I did that, and I received that help, and it was able to educate the people around me, and I was able to do things for this person. and I was able to really and truly help them and save them. And it's changed my life. And so, I encourage anybody that's experiencing this kind of thing to, think about what it is that they know and a way to share that in any way that they can. Like I said, we're now trying to get another Facebook page up with the Save Me campaign, the Save Me Foundation going from what we had before, because we closed the other one down. Things were getting all screwed up at a website. So, and it's nonprofit, and there's no real exchange of money, although a lot of people like to donate things. And then what we just try and do is if we had one gentleman, he was really kick-ass. He donated us 10 tickets to the Indy 500. That's a big deal, man. That's a lot of dough. Wow. We turned around and we were able to use that as a way to provide money to one of the organizations in order to dump some money that they needed for one of these rehabilitation facilities that's doing really great things. I won't reveal some of this stuff because I don't want to put some of them down. I mean, there's a lot of great places out there. There's a lot of bad places too, but any place is better than I don't know if you ever watched a person go through detox through heroin, but it's a pretty sickening and horrible thing to watch. And if you can do anything to prevent it, and feel free to call me, reach out to you. I'd be happy to help with anything. So that's kind of
and it's such an epidemic now. It's excuse me, it's hitting like older people, younger people. I mean, especially in St. Louis. Man. Like I've literally I know it's everywhere, but just me in St. Louis, I just know a couple people, and it literally is an epidemic. You got EMTs rolling around with the Narcans now. Or I think it's called Narcan, or whatever that is. It's really, really sad, man. And it's
a lot of people don't even realize that you got your China White on the East Coast and you got your black tar on the West Coast, and they get a little confused on what's what. They don't see it. When you got a kid who might be 16, 17, he's using needles. You got a serious problem, and you better start acting quickly. And once this kid gets a hold of something that's laced with fentanyl or something, and that's
what I was going to say here. They're doing the fentanyl mix. Yeah,
kids are having to abuse Xanax just to go to sleep at night because they're having so many neurological pains and symptoms. Like imagine like restless leg syndrome, times 10, and they can't sleep. They're up. They're not able to function. So they're like ODing on Xanax, and that's killing them. Like a lot of actors do. They mix too many stupid things. And it's not like the H that kills them, but it's all the other shit they're trying to do to pop out of it, So, anyways, guys.
No, thank you, Woody. We're going to pump all this stuff, pump all your causes, your websites. How can people reach you on like Twitter, Facebook, all that?
Right now, like I said, we're revamping some stuff, but you can on Facebook, you can find it as the Save Me campaign. And as things start to change around, or you can reach out to me just on my personal Facebook page at the time. I go by Richard Woodie Mister. Don't ask me why, but I guess I started it. You know how it is. It's like I gotta address Congress and show up in a 3-piece suit to get my name changed on Facebook. But nevertheless, so that's the way it is. And there's a lot of other projects that I've been working on, movies and things of that nature. But maybe save that for another time.
I'll put you in touch with a couple of my producer-director friends. We might be able to get something working.
Yeah, I've been in SAG for 10 years, so if you ever need an actor to get killed off early in the flick, let me know.
Yeah, you guys can both be in it. If we find the right guy, you guys can both be. I can see Pat being that gruff guy who, what would happen if you had to remove the beard? I mean, I guess it would have to take a lot of money, right?
Well, you know what? After I run Leadville in August, I'll shave it off.
What was the idea we had the other day, Pat? Ex-MMA star travels the world doing seminars, but also engaging in wet works.
Hey, I will plug this last thing is working with Steven on a concept where he really does have access to some of the most phenomenal, the oldest and the ancient, the last of the masters that are out there in the worlds of kenjutsu, karate do, a lot of Okinawan sports. And even into the stuff, we've got Danny Nasanto on the list, but all the fastest masters. And I'd love to collaborate with you, Pat, on making sure that list is great and get you involved in any way, because what we like to do is have a show where we're traveling around and showcasing the masters, bringing some of the best, the top guys. You'd be great for this, and I'd be open to talk to you about that. Bring these guys, and that would be a cool fucking show.
Yeah,
and we've got a whole lot of interest at Discovery and things like that, and so we're kind of pushing that. Steven, he's a little bit pricey, but I think that it's a good draw, and everybody, I don't care who you are, everybody walks away, enjoying meeting the big guy. So, if you've got some ideas, like I said, you've got a lot of history, and so many great people. Nobody's ever really done a show about the last of the match, because once they're gone, they're gone, and we're going to be bummed. Like even in the jiu-jitsu world right now, there's, now that Helio has passed a few years ago, it's sort of like the guys left behind him aren't that old right now.
And Carson passed away too. So
excuse me.
And Carson, his brother, passed away.
Yeah. So it's a perfect point. We were just talking about that last night at dinner, Scott and I. So, we missed that opportunity, and we don't want to miss any more. There's a few guys out there that are like on their last leg, like Ip Man, his two sons. They're like in their 80s, and they're still out there. And Steven has that access, and we can do that. We were going to be reaching out to, and if she ever hears this, and I've talked to Ron Balky about this, but if is talked to his wife Diana Lee Inosanto as a possible co-host option, just because what a great dichotomy of forces there. And so these are ideas we're playing around with, but there's a whole lot of interest in this, and I know, with your martial arts background, I figured you'd think that was an interesting thing, so I just wanted to throw it out there for your fans. We're really moving ahead on this project.
Awesome, brother. Well, Woody, thank you very much for spending so much time with us, man. The stories are incredible. Always an honor to talk to somebody like you. And
ditto, my brother, ditto.
Much. Jeff, you want to close us out?
No, man, bro, believe me, this is about the quietest I've been for any episode. It's been awesome to just sit back and shut what the kids call the fuck up and listen to some amazing stories, sir. I more than appreciate your service, and you're welcome back anytime to pub anything you got going, my friend.
Thanks a lot. I really appreciate it, guys, and God bless you.
All right, Woody, take care, brother.
Absolutely. Mr. Woodie Mister, ladies and gentlemen, stay tuned, folks. There will be more.